to today's Crenshaw Northern Extension scoping meeting. We will begin today's meeting in about 5 minutes at 11:35 to allow everyone to log in and access today's presentation. Thank you. And thank you for your patience and for joining us this morning. We will start in just a couple minutes. Okay, it's 11:35. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first public scoping meeting for the Crenshaw Northern Extension project. As a reminder to everyone, we will be taking comments at the end of the presentation. At this stage, during this initial scoping period, we will not be answering questions, but rather encourage comments that regarding the project and proposed alternatives and options. We also want you to tell us what is important to study during the draft EIR process, which might include key destinations that you think are important to serve, what makes this an important transportation service for you, or What concerns do you have about construction projects? Which all this will be released later and should ultimately answer any questions you may have regarding the project and potential impacts and mitigations. We'll talk more about that and other logistics later, but please note that the chat function has been disabled for this meeting. Instead, all comments during today's meeting should be submitted either in writing or during oral comments period following our presentation. Of course, you can always comment outside today's meeting through our project website at metro.net/Crenshaw North, or our project email, crenshawnorth@metro.net, and our project hotline at 213-418-3093. Comments will be accepted till Friday, May 28th, 2021. Additionally, we will post recordings of the scope meetings on our project page, as all these meetings will be recorded. The draft EIR, which will be released later, should ultimately answer questions you have regarding the project and potential impacts and mitigations. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce any of our elected officials offices that might be attending this morning. Please let us know, and thank you for joining us today. Next slide. So some quick housekeeping items. We have both Spanish and Russian translation available for this and all of our project scope meetings. For other interpretation, just click on the word on the world or a globe icon and pick the language you would like to listen to and follow along as we move forward through this presentation. Go ahead, Alan.
Sí, solamente un detalle más, para aquellos que ocupen interpretación en español, tienen que hacer clic en el icono de mundo, escoja la opción para español y así va a poder seguir la junta en español, traducida al español. And now we go for
Alexander.
Russian.
Well, for housekeeping, please note that today's meeting is being recorded and that all attendees' cameras are off with microphones muted until the comment period, which will immediately follow Metro's presentation. If you have any technical issues with accessing the meeting or presentation, please call our technical support hotline at 213-316-6105. That's 213-316-6105. Code of conduct. To ensure a fair and equitable process by all participants, we ask that you please follow these rules and respect the meeting format and everyone's opportunity to comment. Please turn off your cell phones and the background noise when speaking. Treat fellow community members and agency representatives, Metro staff, and others with respect. Address all comments to Metro staff and consultants, not other attendees, and please maintain a conversational tone. The agenda. Here's today's agenda. We'll start with a 30-minute presentation on the project, which will include a brief history and background, project goals and objectives, and the alternatives currently under study. We'll then give an overview of the EIR, the environmental process, and the next steps for the project. After we finish the presentation, we'll be here till 1:30 to allow enough time for participants to provide comments. And with that, I'll turn it over to our project manager, Roger Martin, and Deputy Project Manager, Alex Basavi, will take us to the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, Patrick and everyone else out there, and thank you very much for joining us today. Scoping is the first step in the environmental clearance process, consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act. As you may have heard the term CEQA before. Since there's no federal funding associated with this project this time, we will not be doing NEPA or which identifies the National Environmental Policy Act at this point. So no NEPA at this point, only CEQA. During this meeting, we have three major objectives, of course. One is to provide an overview of the project and alternatives under study. Two is to describe the draft EIR process and how it will apply to the project. And third, and mostly, of course, we want to hear from you on the project, including the project alternatives and options. So there's alternatives and options, and any environmental issues of particular concern to you. So before we go forward, we'd like to share with everyone a short video that the marketing here at Metro made along with the community relations team. And if we can share that video at this time would be, there we go, thank you.
Metro is planning rail to bridge divides.
we want to provide you the latest information on the Crenshaw Northern Extension, which will create an important north-south connection through the heart of LA.
Some of the biggest employment centers and destinations in Southern California are also the hardest to get to. Central LA has some of the worst traffic in the entire county, and while Metro's rail network is expanding west, this area is still not directly served by high-capacity transit.
Metro has a plan to make it easier to get around, with dozens of projects to improve public transportation, including the Crenshaw Northern Extension.
This project will help to fill in key parts of Metro's network to connect more people to more places and create more access to opportunity by connecting areas that have been historically separated by the I-10 freeway and uneven amounts of investment.
We're preparing the next phase of planning on this project, but before we get into the latest updates and next steps, we'll give a quick recap of how we got here.
During the planning of the Crenshaw LAX project, Metro identified the need to fill the gap between LAX, the E line, D line, and the B line. The Crenshaw Northern Extension was included as a project to be funded by Measure M, a half-cent sales tax measure that passed in 2016.
While Measure M has this project slated for the future, Metro is planning it now because there are exploratory efforts that could make funding available sooner.
In summer of 2018, Metro finished an initial feasibility study and alternatives analysis for this project, which identified 5 potential routes or alternatives. In the fall of 2020, Metro completed an advanced alternative screening study, which further studied these routes.
During the alternatives analysis study, public comments included preferences on routes, as well as transit connections and destinations to be served, including the Hollywood Bowl, the need for pedestrian safety and having rail at a different level than the street, concerns about neighborhood preservation and access to stations.
Based on public feedback and additional study, we further refined our alternatives to 3 potential routes for this project, which are the La Brea alternative, the Fairfax alternative, and the Fairfax-San Vicente hybrid alternative.
From the E line, all alternatives go north up Crenshaw Boulevard to a proposed station at Crenshaw Adams in the core of West Adams. From there, all go north to a proposed station at the Midtown Shopping Center with connections to the Pico Rimpau Transit Center.
The La Brea alternative goes up La Brea Avenue, connecting to the future Metro D line at Wilshire La Brea, and then to Highland Avenue to link up to the Metro B line at Hollywood Highland Station.
The Fairfax alternative goes up Fairfax Avenue, connecting to the future Metro D line station at Wilshire Fairfax, with a station at Museum Row. From there, it heads north with a proposed station near the Grove. It turns east at Santa Monica Boulevard before connecting to the Metro B line at Hollywood Highland Station.
The Fairfax-San Vicente alternative also goes north on Fairfax Avenue, with proposed stations to serve Museum Row and the Grove, before veering west on Beverly Boulevard to serve Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and the Beverly Center. It then turns north on San Vicente, with the proposed station to serve West Hollywood's Nightlife District and the Pacific Design Center, before turning east to link up to the Metro B line at the Hollywood Highland Station.
Based on public input, we've also added an optional Hollywood Bowl terminus to each of these alternatives. A station at the Hollywood Bowl could improve the travel options to this major regional destination while serving up to 1 million trips there each year.
These are the alternatives that we will be taking into the environmental process. Environmental review is a formal, regulated process where Metro will study various aspects of each alternative, including benefits, cost, feasibility, community impacts, and any necessary mitigations.
There are several points of community input during this process as Metro develops the Environmental Impact Report, which will recommend a proposed project to the Metro Board of Directors for approval.
We are now embarking on the first step in this process, which is called scoping. At this stage, we want to hear from you about what Metro should consider and study as we prepare the Environmental Impact Report for the Crenshaw Northern Extension.
Possible comments might include input on destinations that you think are important to serve, what would make this a good transportation service for you, or concerns you might have about construction impacts.
We will be conducting formal scoping meetings where we can hear your comments. We'll also have information about the project online for you to browse on your own time.
We can also take formal comments via mail, phone, email, and our website during the scoping comment period. Thank you for all of your input along the way that has helped to shape this project. And as always, if you have questions, please get in touch.
Perfect. I really enjoyed that video. So hey, it's Roger back here with you. So as noted in the video, the Crenshaw Northern Extension Project would extend the Crenshaw LAX line, which is currently under construction, north from the E or the Expo line, connecting to the D line, with purple line, of course, and coming up further to the B or the red line in Hollywood. If you're not familiar with this map over here, the green line on the bottom of it, that's the east-west, that's of course is the green line coming over. Just above that is the LAX connector right through there. And then if you go up to the next line, which is that blue Expo line, of course, that's the Expo line right there, the east-west line, followed by the purple dash line, of course, is the Metro Purple line. Scheduled to open up here in a couple more years. And that pink hybrid line is pointing to the Hollywood Highland Station right there. There we go. So with that, perfect. So by closing the gap in the regional north-south transit network, the project would directly link to 4 of Metro's rail lines and 5 of our heaviest bus lines in the county, allowing a seamless one-seat ride from the South Bay, South LA, LAX, all the way up to mid-cities, central Los Angeles, West Hollywood, and Hollywood, and further connections to the San Fernando Valley through the red line, through the Metro B line up there. In fact, the project would allow future Crenshaw LAX line riders to access the entire Metro Rail system, including all Metro Rail stations, and at most with just a single transfer. So additionally, the project could provide service to some of the busiest and most densest employment and activity centers in Southern California. So it's a pretty good little deal. Based on the Measure M schedule, which was approved by LA County voters in 2016, construction for the project would start in the year 2041 and open for service in 2047. Measure M provides $2.24 billion for this project. However, efforts to accelerate the project are being explored, and the city of West Hollywood, in coordination with the city of Los Angeles, of course, to conducting an early project delivery study in 2020 to identify alternative funds that could potentially help build this project sooner. And with that, the next slide, of course, the project objectives here. It aims to satisfy multiple objectives, including, of course, 1, we talked about closing the regional transit network gap. 2, to provide a fast and reliable transit alternative to the congested roadways. And let me see here real quick here. Because most of you know it's pretty congested out there. It's really, really tight. The area is extremely congested due to the concentration of jobs, residents, and major destinations in this particular area. So it's quite a thing out there right now. At the same time, of course, travel within through this area is greatly constrained to the high demand for travel, coupled with the limited roadway capacity. So yeah, it's a struggle for sure over there. But what we also want to do, of course, is improve mobility and accessibility, not just within the project area, in the central area itself, but throughout the county and the wider region as a whole. And lastly, of course, is kind of cultivate a transit-friendly environment and maximize the potential for smart population and job growth. So if this project were to be constructed, the project would greatly improve mobility and access to jobs and opportunities for all county residents, especially transit-dependent residents with limited auto access, from South Bay, South LA, all the way to the San Fernando Valley. So with that, I think Alex Musavi is going to take you through a few slides, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. This map here shows how the project fits into the overall transportation network and other Measure M projects underway in this general area, including, of course, the Purple Line extension, which will open to Beverly Hills in just 3 years, and ultimately all the way to Westwood and the VA hospital by 2027. This project would, of course, directly connect to the Purple Line in the Miracle Mile area. To the north, we have the North Hollywood Pasadena Bus Rapid Transit Project. And on the west side, there's the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, which will link the San Fernando Valley to the west side, primarily along the Sepulveda Boulevard 405 freeway corridor, and ultimately all the way down to LAX. Before we get into the specific alternatives for the project, here's a brief history of some of the past studies that are related to our current efforts. From as far back as 2003, planning studies for the Crenshaw LAX line have explored opportunities to extend the line all the way to Wilshire and the Purple Line, and even further north to Hollywood. Due to funding constraints, however, any segment of the line north of the Expo or E line was eliminated from the Crenshaw LAX line project back in 2009. At roughly that same time, the West Side Subway Extension EIR was studying a potential heavy rail transit extension from Hollywood through West Hollywood and Mid-City West to the Purple Line along Wilshire Boulevard. The current studies for a northern extension of the Crenshaw LAX line began in 2016 with the passage of Measure M and Metro's board commitment to bring this project, along with others, to a shovel-ready status in case of potential funding opportunities for project acceleration. An initial alternatives analysis study was completed in 2018, followed by an alternative screening study last year in 2020. This next map shows the initial 5 alternatives that were explored in the alternatives analysis study. From west to east, they were San Vicente, La Cienega, Fairfax, La Brea, and Vermont. All alternatives would attract significant ridership, with approximately 90,000 boardings or more on a daily basis, based on the AA study. The La Brea alternative, of course, is the shortest, fastest, and most cost-effective alignment, as it's the most direct route between Mid-City and Hollywood, with a minimum of total of 6 new stations over about 6.5 miles. On the next slide, part of the original alternatives analysis study looked at existing jobs and residents within just a half-mile walking distance of all the alternatives that extend to Hollywood. This analysis showed that while all of the alternatives serve a significant number of jobs and residents, the Fairfax and Fairfax San Vicente alternatives and stations serve the most jobs and residents by far, by directly serving some of the biggest job centers in the region, including places like the Grove Farmers Market, CBS Television City, the Pacific Design Center, and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The jobs and residents analysis showed that compared to the La Brea alternative, the Fairfax alternative would serve more than twice the number of jobs than La Brea, and the San Vicente alternative would serve more than quadruple the number of jobs than La Brea, or more than double that of Fairfax. Even when broken down by distance, the longer Fairfax and San Vicente alternatives would serve significantly more residents and especially jobs per mile than La Brea. And of course, in line with this analysis, existing transit ridership near potential project stations also reflects the heavy activity and congestion near some of those major job centers in the western portion of the study area. Transit ridership near the Fairfax alternative stations is roughly 3 times that of the La Brea alternative stations, while transit ridership near the Fairfax San Vicente alternative stations is over 4 times that of the La Brea alternative stations. And this has largely been reflected in the comments we have received to date regarding the project. We've had several opportunities so far for public meetings throughout the previous studies and have collected a significant number of comments so far, many of which have shaped the current alternatives and options under study. Overall, we've heard strong support for the project and accelerating it and opening it sooner than the Measure M schedule date of 2047. We've also heard preferences for the project to serve some of the major destinations and job centers in the western half of the project area, including a desire to combine alternatives or build more than one or even all. We've also heard considerable support for extending the line further north than Hollywood Highland to serve the Hollywood Bowl. So based on public feedback and additional analyses, we have refined the project alternatives to the 3 routes shown on this map for further study during this EIR environmental process. All of these alternatives would be entirely underground in a subway configuration, with the potential possible exception of a small section along San Vicente Boulevard between Stanley Avenue in the west and Midtown Crossing in the east, which I'll get to shortly. But before we go through each of these alternatives, I'd just like to emphasize that all alternatives have the same station locations, both in the north and in the south. In the south, all the alternatives extend the Crenshaw line north from its terminus at Crenshaw Expo, under Crenshaw Boulevard to a station at the Crenshaw-Adams intersection in West Adams. They all then continue north to a station at Midtown Crossing and the Pico Rimpau Transit Center in the heart of Mid-City along San Vicente Boulevard between Venice and Pico. Similarly, in the north, all the alternatives have a station at Santa Monica La Brea in eastern West Hollywood and at Hollywood Highland to connect to the Metro B or Red Line, with an additional optional station at the Hollywood Bowl. So the primary difference between the alternatives is between the Midtown Crossing station in the south and the Santa Monica La Brea station in the north. The La Brea alternative would use La Brea Avenue as a more direct route to connect Mid-City with Hollywood, with 2 additional interim stations at Wilshire La Brea to connect to the D or Purple Line, and Beverly La Brea near the neighborhood of Hancock Park. Like all the alternatives, it would also include potential stations at Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood Highland, with an optional extension north to the Hollywood Bowl. As mentioned before, this La Brea alternative would have a minimum of 6 stations over 6.5 miles, with the total travel time between the Expo line and Crenshaw Expo all the way to Hollywood Highland of just over 12 minutes. This next map gives some more context to the La Brea alternative, as well as the other 2 longer alternatives, which I'll go through now. The Fairfax alternative would follow San Vicente Boulevard from Mid-City's Midtown Crossing Station, then Fairfax Avenue north through Miracle Mile and Mid-City West to serve several major activity centers in areas of high population and job density. This alternative would have additional stations at Wilshire Fairfax to connect to the Metro D or Purple Line, and on Fairfax between 3rd and Beverly near the Grove and CBS Television City. It would then continue north to a station at Santa Monica Fairfax in Central West Hollywood and proceed, just like La Brea and all the alternatives, to Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood Highland, with an optional extension, of course, to the Hollywood Bowl. This alternative would have a minimum of 7 stations over 8 miles, with a total end-to-end travel time to Hollywood Highland of about 15 minutes, or 3 minutes longer than La Brea. And finally, the Fairfax San Vicente or hybrid alternative would follow the exact same route and stations as the Fairfax alternative, north to a station at Wilshire Fairfax in Museum Row, and a station under Fairfax between Beverly and 3rd, near the Grove and CBS Television City. From there, it would veer west under Beverly Boulevard to a station at Beverly La Cienega, near the Beverly Center and Cedars-Sinai Medical Campus. It would then head north to a station at Santa Monica San Vicente to serve the Pacific Design Center, West Hollywood's Rainbow District, and the Sunset Strip. It would then continue east under Santa Monica Boulevard with stations at Santa Monica Fairfax, and like all the alternatives, Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood Highland, with an optional extension to the Hollywood Bowl. This alternative includes a potential optional additional station at Santa Monica La Cienega as well, though it may be possible to serve Western West Hollywood with a single station, including possibly somewhere between San Vicente and La Cienega. Also, it's important to note that this Fairfax San Vicente hybrid alternative would serve all of the same station areas and destinations as the Fairfax alternative, plus additional destinations along the San Vicente corridor. This Fairfax San Vicente alternative would have a minimum of 9 stations over just under 10 miles, with the total travel time of about 20 minutes all the way to Hollywood Highland. So between 4 to 5 minutes longer than the Fairfax alternative from end to end, and up to 8 minutes longer than the La Brea alternative from end to end. This alternative was introduced as a result of public feedback we've received on the project. It provides a much easier connection for riders transferring between this new line and the Purple Line by moving that connection to Wilshire Fairfax. The previous connection at Wilshire San Vicente would have required riders to walk up to 1/3 of a mile to transfer between these 2 lines. The new Fairfax San Vicente alternative, as shown on the map, could potentially serve several major activity centers while still offering a fast, reliable, and competitive travel option for regional riders and trips that traverse the area. While this alternative has several curves in the northern half of the project area, this type of curvature is quite common on mass transit systems around the globe. By being entirely below ground in subway tunnels, these types of alignments can directly link major activity centers and areas of significant transit ridership together, while maintaining fast travel speeds and avoiding areas that may not generate much ridership, and in a more cost-effective manner than building multiple separate lines and projects in a particular geographic area and given heavily constrained resources. Also, all of the curves, in accordance with Metro's rail design criteria, would have wide radii and are located directly adjacent to potential stations,
where the trains are already slowing and stopping anyways, thereby greatly minimizing any travel time delay for riders. A great way to experience what these curves would be like today is to actually ride the Metro Red or B-Line subway through East Hollywood. If you ride it between the Hollywood Western and Sunset Vermont stations, you'll notice there's a wide curve there from Vermont to Hollywood. Because of its adjacency to the Vermont Sunset Station, though, it's nearly impossible to notice any significant slowdown or time delay due to the curve itself. Next slide. Regardless of alternative, the project will, of course, require a maintenance and storage facility for the additional light rail vehicles that will be needed to operate the full line from South LA and LAX all the way to Hollywood. The draft EIR will explore several potential sites for this facility adjacent to and near the current Southwest Yard that is being constructed for the current Crenshaw LAX line, which is located just to the northeast of LAX, around the intersections of Aviation and Arbor Vitae. This next slide shows peak period travel time comparisons between some major points throughout the county and project area. The first two columns are origins and destinations. The third column is typical peak period or rush hour travel times by auto. The next column or fourth column shows typical peak period travel times on the existing and future transit network, but without this project. These times incorporate other Measure M transit projects that are scheduled to open before this project, but do not include the project itself. And finally, the last column shows the travel times with the Crenshaw Northern Extension project in place. For example, a trip from Hollywood to Cedars-Sinai could be reduced from over 30 minutes during rush hour to just 8 minutes every time, regardless of traffic or time of day. Cedars-Sinai to West Adams could be reduced from almost an hour to just 10 minutes every time, regardless of traffic or time of day. And Leimert Park to Westwood could go from over an hour today to just 26 minutes. And LAX all the way to Miracle Mile or the Grove could go from over an hour to just half an hour, regardless of traffic. In addition to the 3 different alternatives, there are several design options that we would like your input on, which are shown in this map. I'll go through each one starting in the south with the alignment options between West Adams and Mid-City. As you can see on this next map, we have 2 route options that would link the Crenshaw Adams station in West Adams and the Midtown Crossing station in Mid-City. Alignment option 1 would primarily run below the major roadways of Crenshaw and Venice Boulevards, while alignment option 2 would follow a shorter, more direct route between the 2 stations. Immediately to the north, we previously shared an option that included at grade in the median of San Vicente Boulevard between approximately Stanley Avenue, just east of the San Vicente Fairfax Olympic intersection, and La Brea Avenue, where it transitioned up to an aerial structure to serve an aerial station at Midtown Crossing before going back underground near the West Boulevard Bridge. Based on feedback we've heard from the community, we have added a fully underground design option for this section, including an underground station at Midtown Crossing. It should be noted that the rest of the project, regardless of alternative or options, would run in a subway or underground configuration due to a variety of major factors, including heavy traffic volumes and congestion, existing limited roadway widths and capacities, adjacent land uses, and of course, the need to be grade separated at major intersections and crossings. And finally, at the northern end of the project, we've added an option to extend the line further north from Hollywood at Highland, with a potential northern terminus station at the Hollywood Bowl, near Highland and the 101 freeway. And now Roger will take us through the EIR process and next steps for the project.
Hey, perfect. Thank you, Alex. So as we mentioned, we're currently in the state environmental clearance phase of the project. We're actually doing CEQA, not NEPA at this point. So with the draft environmental impact report and advanced conceptual engineering is what's used to support the draft environmental impact report with regards to that. So following the advanced conceptual engineering, what we call ACE, the project would need to go through further engineering and design work, including possible federal environmental clearance if any federal funds were to be identified for this project. And after that, the final engineering or design, construction can begin, followed by the revenue service of the line, which is further up there. So the EIA process, the current environmental clearance phase of the project will analyze the project and its potential impacts and benefits from a variety of standpoints, including construction feasibility and potential mitigations that could lessen or even avoid any potential adverse impacts from the project during construction. Over here. The EI categories, this is a list of them. I think there's about 23 of them here listed above here. These are also found in Appendix G of the CEQA guidelines, but these are normal areas of resources that we clear under CEQA for you. On the next slide here coming up is the assessing the construction impacts. The EIR analysis will include a full assessment of impacts during construction of the project as well. You know, station construction is generally where we have our biggest impacts because that's where the excavation is going on for the stations right there. So in between, of course, the tunnel boring machines go under streets or under properties, and it's a pretty easy deal to do that. And so we generally may close the intersections at several weekends where we go into and excavate about 10 feet down or so, and then we put cross beams across the street and then put a concrete deck over that. So for the next several years, we're actually building under the deck, the station itself. And then we leave the decking in place for the cars to travel through, so there's no impacts with regards to travel through that. Anyway, so in the end, of course, we come back and we take the concrete decking out and build the street on top of the subway station. So the EIR will evaluate and identify the tunnel and station construction processes for all the proposed alternatives, including truck hauling routes and other traffic considerations, as well as things like air quality and air noise levels during specific construction activities. The renderings here on the right of this map, of the screen up here, they kind of give you an idea of the concrete decking and that we would still continue to construct below. This is similar to what's done on the Metro Purple line right now in sections 1, 2, and 3 respectively over there. So for funding considerations, the EIR will also include a detailed analysis of costs for the project alternatives, building off the initial estimates from the previous studies that were done. All alternatives will cost significantly more than what Measure M is providing. So other potential funding sources would and could, of course, be crucial to the project feasibility. These sources could include unidentified federal, state, or local funding, as well as value capture mechanisms and potential public-private partnerships that could help shoulder some of the costs for the project. Over here in our next slide. So Patrick, you want to take on the slides for the draft EIR process?
Thanks, Roger. For the next steps of the EIR process, we will be gathering and documenting all community input at this and other scoping meetings, as well as through mail, email, and our project hotline. We will then use that feedback to further refine the alternatives and assess the full spectrum of impacts of each alternative, both during construction and once in operation, including possible mitigation measures to reduce these impacts to a less than significant level, or even avoid or eliminate certain impacts. By the end of the draft EIR process, we hope to identify a proposed project to bring back to the Metro Board for their approval. I want to give you a rundown of the next steps before we start taking comments, since some of you leave after sharing your comments. After we receive all of your comments during the scoping period, we will prepare a scoping report which summarizes all the comments, and we'll use that information as we go forward in the environmental process, including future community meetings, to provide periodic updates for the community. Right now, we're at the end of April, and we have 2 more meetings coming up early May. I assume we would be back in the fall with an update on all the comments we've heard, what the next steps are, and an update on how we are proceeding with the analysis. Metro will post all information on the project page. You can go there to get information about meetings, status, and reports that are available. We will notify everyone who came to this meeting who signed in. We will add your information to our stakeholder list about future meetings. And again, we will post the recordings of scope meetings on our project page. We want to hear from you. We strongly encourage everyone to provide feedback however they can, whether it's today or through email, mail, etc. Some key topics you may want to include are what environmental issues you may be concerned about. Do you have a preference regarding the alternatives or design options under construction, under consideration, including potential station locations? We ask that you limit your comments today to 2 minutes to allow everyone who would like to participate a chance to provide feedback. We will be listening and documenting all of your comments, but we will not be answering questions at this time or in this forum. And just a reminder of the code of conduct, we want to give everyone a chance to speak. How to submit your public comments. In order to submit oral comments today, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And if you're on a phone, dial *9 on your phone. When we have announced that it's your turn to speak, you will be prompted to unmute your mic, both on Zoom or on your phone. You'll have 2 minutes to comment. You can also submit written comments today using the Zoom Q&A feature, if many of you have. And of course, you can always submit comments to our project hotline at 213-418-3093 or by emailing us at crenshawnorth@metro.net. And we will also conduct another 2 scope meetings. The second one will be on Thursday, May 6th from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The third, Saturday, May 8th from 10 a.m. to noon. They will all be on Zoom, and you see how to mail, email, and phone in your comments, and also the project website.
Our first 3 speakers will be Henry Morgan, Zenon Crow, and Jonathan Strauss. Henry, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Henry?
assume you can hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I want to thank you very much for what looks like the hybrid route that looks like it's probably the best of all the possible combinations I've seen so far on this. So that looks fabulous. And I realize, of course, it's the most expensive. So one of the questions I have is, and I know you're not answering right now, but to address as part of your presentation, how you expect the ridership to be able to pay that back over time. I would expect that since it's a much more dense area with much higher likely ridership, that it'll pay for itself in about the same amount of time as going one of the other routes that doesn't do as much for you as far as riders go. But you probably need to make that point. And then the other thing is, I really appreciate the all underground approach. I live in that general area where it would be partially above ground. And I think, as somebody has already said in the Q&A, that would really impact the neighborhood in a very negative way, blocking off, simple walking across paths that we have on San Vicente and all kinds of other stuff. So staying underground is really ideal. The only disadvantage of this new approach that I see is that I'd have to walk a little further up Fairfax to catch the entrance instead of at San Vicente. I'll live with that problem. And I think this actually gives me an excellent way to get around town. The problem is, of course, I don't know if I'll still be living here by the time this starts, unless you can start way earlier than 2041. Oh, and one last question I had to address is it possible to do a phased opening like you are on the Purple Line? Perhaps get the segment from the south up through, let's say, Cedar Sinai up and running, and then finish up the rest of it so that it's already starting to pay for itself a little bit along the way. Okay, that's all I have to share.
Great, thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Zenon Crow, Jonathan Strauss, and John Erickson. Zenon, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking.
Hi, thank you guys so much for preparing all the alternatives and coming out with us to hear the community's concerns today. I really wanted to focus in on the branch alternative, which I know you guys haven't studied, but has been generating a lot of buzz, especially in online transit circles. Is there any sort of, in the study scope, precluding the idea of having this study of alternatives be split into 2 lines? So what I mean by that is the hybrid option, the La Brea option, all these options are kind of, the hybrid option is basically trying to meet a bunch of different needs at once. You have a need to go from the south to the north, right? And that's just direct connections, red line to Expo line. And you have a need to hit all the job centers and the occupation centers along West Hollywood, along Cienega, and all of those areas. So is there any possible way that in this alternative study, it could be split into two different lines? Basically one line, which is a La Brea alignment, which allows for a speedy transition of people going from the south to the north. And looking at the ridership statistics you guys came up with, I think there was only about like 2,000 people difference between doing the straight La Brea and doing the hybrid option. And then two, not only having just that La Brea option, but having La Brea plus a branch that goes from the Hollywood Highland Station down Santa Monica into West Hollywood, and then down La Cienega to the Purple Line. And so this two-line approach would get the best of both worlds, because you get that quick north-south, transit connection that you really need to facilitate good bus travel, while also simultaneously having another line that serves the actual job centers. And you could operate with the current funding that you'd save by using the La Brea option, you could allocate what would have been other funding for the hybrid option to then build a spur, at least from Santa Monica and Highland, Hollywood and Highland, all the way over to Santa Monica and La Cienega. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Jonathan Strauss, John Erickson, and Mehmet Berker. Jonathan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm a resident of West Hollywood. More specifically, I live very close to the Pacific Design Center, and I would like to vehemently advocate for the hybrid option. Thank all of you for all the work that has gone into this over the years, and I trust that the experts at Metro have studied many of the alternatives, and that the three being proposed are the best available options. I would also would love to have the extension up to the Hollywood Bowl. Our family would go there much more often if we could access it easier. And finally, the biggest environmental concern that I have with this project is how long it's going to take, and the amount of air pollution and traffic that we're going to have to endure in the time while we wait. So I advocate for whatever measures we can to speed the construction of the hybrid line, completion of the hybrid line as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be John Erickson, Mehmet Berker, and Dan Wenzel. John, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking.
Thank you very much. My name is John Erickson. I'm a council member here in the city of West Hollywood, and I live on the east side. I want to advocate strongly for the hybrid route coming through our city. As many residents and people know that are on this call, West Hollywood, like many people across Los Angeles, overwhelmingly have voted for public transportation to come through and open up our city to the rest of the region. The hybrid route not only serves our major job centers, but also will help get people out of cars into public transportation and better improve our infrastructure and make more access to people in West Hollywood, but in our surrounding West Side cities area, as well as our entire region over here, more accessible to get into a train, get out of their cars, improve the environmental qualities, and be able to get around the county and city more easily. And who wouldn't like to go from West Hollywood to LAX in the amount of time that we are able to with this route? This is a critical improvement for our region, for our environment, and for our investment in our future, as well as for our children's future and our society's future. I too would love to see and end up at the Hollywood Highland stop. I frequently will walk home from Hollywood and Highland, but how amazing would it be if I could get on a train and get home just as easily? I want to thank Metro staff, as well as everyone who's been calling in to advocate for the continued expansion of Metro, and really looking forward to getting some shovels in the ground and getting this going for so many of us here in West Hollywood and in the surrounding region. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers.
Melanie, I just want to jump in and just recognize that Jay Greenstein with Councilman Kretz's office is joining us today. Take it away.
Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Mehmet Berker, Dan Wenzel, and Lizzie Mandler. Mehmet, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking.
Hey, hi. Thanks for staff for this presentation. My first concerns are about the presentation itself. First of all, in past meetings, I have asked Metro how they are surveying actual riders, not just community members that live around a potential line. What do the riders of the 212, 217, 780, 705, and other north-south buses think? What do they want? Because their voices are not being talked about. I'm also disappointed in this presentation, one, acting like the bus system doesn't exist. Metro is undergoing the next gen process to improve our bus network, and you're acting like if a rail line doesn't go directly to the front door of something, it's inaccessible, and that's completely against the entire point of making our network better. I'd also just like to point out that we're talking about a hybrid line that is about what, $6.6 billion of an estimation. And according to the survey, the report commissioned by WeHo itself, WeHo can at most raise $1 billion, but you've created an even bigger hole by accepting that money. So in a sense, it's a poison pill. I also don't understand why this scoping doesn't include an option of creating branch lines, as an earlier caller brought up to me. If we're going to spend $6.6 billion, we're already going way past Measure M anyways, and we may as well build a very fast and efficient north-south completion to our network, enabling faster transportation across the network, paired with an east-west high-capacity transit option along one of our major transit corridors as it exists now. I've taken the 704 for 10 years, getting off and on in Vista and Santa Monica, and an east-west connection is important there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Dan Wenzel, Lizzie Mandler, and Terrence Milonas. Dan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Dan Wenzel, and I am a transit advocate living in West Hollywood and a member of the Transportation Commission. I want to thank Metro for this presentation and for scoping and for this project. That we enthusiastically support this project. West Hollywood and Mid-City West voted 85% for Measure R in 2008 and 85% for Measure M in 2016. We want Metro Rail. Also, there are tons of working class jobs at the Grove, at Television City, which is expanding, the Beverly Center, Cedars-Sinai, West Hollywood, all the hotels and restaurants in our area. This line will serve people day and night. And now if I heard correctly, it's only an extra 3 minutes of time difference to ride up La Brea. I mean, ride up Fairfax to La Brea, and only 10 minutes on the hybrid. It completely blows the speed alignment for La Brea out of the water. So please do not skip and bypass our neighborhoods with a line on La Brea. There's nothing there. It skips all of our major ridership destinations. Please pick Fairfax or the hybrid. Thank you for taking comments. Thank you for listening about how it's going to be built. And, it'll be nice for Metro to work with YIMBY's people. Yes, in my back, yes, here, build here. It'll be a wonderful event and I look forward to it. Yes, more Metro Rail and soon. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Lizzie Mandler, Terrence Milonas, and Quentin Latis. Lizzie, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
It's not. Oh, hi. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for the presentation. This is wonderful. We did a council meeting like last year and heard a similar presentation. And I think the hybrid line or the lines that reach the Grove and Cedars are incredibly important. That being said, I own a house that is in that stretch, the only stretch that's at grade. And it's incredibly short-sighted and unfair to just do that one stretch at grade. It's going to make my property value completely plummet as my house faces San Vicente. So I'm not someone who lives like a block away. I have to sell my house if this goes through because my house is facing the Metro Rail. You're going to destroy beautiful trees that go down that median that the people in the neighborhood love. That median could be utilized as a park for the community and create a better environment in that little median rather than putting a Metro Rail, which is going to cause incredible noise pollution, as well as just, I mean, that's it for the houses that go along San Vicente in that grade. Again, I'm completely in support of this. I think it's really important, but I think it's crucial that this goes underground the entire way. I think it's really short-sighted to think of the money that it would cost to take that section underground in comparison to the cost of the entire project. And, you know, alternatively run it down Pico, which is not residential. It's all businesses where it would benefit for it to be at grade. But in a residential neighborhood to run it at grade when in Beverly Hills, they were able to fight to get it underground is incredibly unfair. So I'm just here to really advocate for the property owners of the neighborhood to say that there would be such huge detriment if you guys run this at grade on this strip of San Vicente. But thank you so much for taking the time and listening to us. I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot from our community and looking forward to having Metro in the neighborhood, just hopefully underground.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Terrence Milonas, Corentin Ladis, and Samuel Lev. Terrence, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can.
Okay, great. So actually, I'll be pretty fast because I think that literally the previous speaker hit on all the points I wanted to hit on, but just from a different angle. I think we know from the Expo line and the Crenshaw line experience, even though that's not open yet, that the at grade is suboptimal. I think if we all had unlimited funds, we wouldn't have the at grade or above grade portion between Midtown Crossing and Fairfax. And I just want to be a strong advocate. This is a project that's going to make, you know, a huge impact, positive impact on Los Angeles. And let's just take the funds and put them towards putting the best train possible. And I think that means, you know, making it a subway the entire way, preserving the community that it's going to be going through, you know. And again, we're kind of starved, you know, to echo the previous caller's comments, we're starved for open space. And San Vicente is a very beautiful street with, you know, some epic trees. It would be a shame to actually tear those down and replace it with an at-grade rail that divides the community and takes away open space that we're starved for. So I just strongly advocate trying to find the funds to actually make it a subway for the entire spur. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Corentin Ladis, Samuel Lev, and Brandon Kaplan. Corentin, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Thank you for presenting this new version of the proposal with the tree road. First, I want to say that I'm a strong supporter of more metro line, more subway. I believe Los Angeles needed. As a European, I grew up taking the metro every day, and I think it's an amazing way to travel, and it's a great way to create more fairness also between the community and access to every part of the city. Now, living around the San Vicente area, I gotta say, just seeing that above grade route was studied seems to me completely surreal. This is the only area that is residential of the whole route, and this is the only place where it was thought that it would be a possibility to put something that is at grade. And to me, from an environmental standpoint, this is surreal. This is a lack of yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy to me. It's going to create like visual pollution, sound pollution. It's going to destroy trees. It's going to destroy property value. I mean, on every level, this is a complete catastrophe. And as someone mentioned in the chat, like thinking about in the next 40, 60, 70 years, there is no way it's a good idea to have a hub on above ground or at ground rail. So yeah, that's about it. I support the whole project, but please do not create like a at grade rail on a residential area. This would be a nightmare. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to briefly recognize Andrew Connick with Council Member Rahman's office and also Mayor Horvath with the City of West Hollywood.
Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Samuel Lev, Brandon Kaplan, and Mike Williams. Samuel, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, everybody. I just want to thank Metro for having these meetings for one. And I would just like to express a bit of disappointment that, that none of the alternatives include spur lines, that it's kind of this like jammed in all in one hybrid or something that kind of will leave people feeling left out. Personally, I feel the best option is the one that will be the fastest. Rail is, faster than buses because it's separated from traffic. And if you have it wind everywhere and go slower, it defeats the purpose of spending all this money for a faster mode of traffic to begin with. So I really feel that the review should, as other people have mentioned, include spur lines and extensions and other options so that people living in West Hollywood don't feel, excluded from the project. I know it's probably too late to add it, but I would like to air my grievance that, that everything was kind of jammed into one instead of recognizing that we can have several projects that serve everybody. We don't need to sacrifice speed just to get to a couple of places. We can have other projects that will reach Cedars-Sinai and West Hollywood. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I know there's extra time, but yeah, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Brandon Kaplan, Mike Williams, and Aaron Stein-Chester. Brandon, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm a constituent in Beverly Hills. Super excited about this. I'm like trying to restrain myself from jumping out of excitement. But I would like to start off with that Hollywood Bowl station, I think is critical because I mean, I myself have never been, but I can tell you I've sat in that traffic at like 11:30 at night on a Saturday. And I think a transit option there is crucial. I'd also just like to point out, I've learned a lot about the history of this. And, we had a line down Santa Monica, we had a line up San Vicente that branched off Venice, and you had the Venice line, and then, the one that ran through the 101. And it's interesting to me. But yeah, this idea of branching lines is fascinating. This is a critically difficult and critically important project area. And I know it would create also a hefty price tag. But branching lines, it's interesting to me. And I also laud and applaud the pretty much all underground option. I mean, I know that's a big ask. That is a big ask for y'all because it's so expensive. But thank you for that. And this is exciting. And construction wise, you have a difficult path ahead. And I'm very curious to hear more about that because this is a unique area. That's not like the Purple Line where you have Wilshire where it's less dense, but there's more density. So I would love to hear more about construction. And this idea of branching lines, phased openings. I think the phased opening could be very helpful. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the work you do.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Mike Williams, Aaron Stein-Chester, and Steve Lance. Frank, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. This is Mike Williams, and I would like to, like Brandon, I'm very excited for the hybrid route and the Metro Rail coming in our neighborhoods. I was wondering if there might be some money in the upcoming American Jobs Bill that the president is proposing, especially since Pete Buttigieg is our new transportation director. I would assume he's going to be a big advocate for rail. So I'm hoping that that might happen. I would also like to advocate for a Hollywood Bowl stop, as I usually park at Hollywood Highland and take the Metro bus up there. Taking a Metro line right from West Hollywood up to the Bowl would be amazing, as well as getting to LAX so quickly. In addition, no one's spoken about this. I know we talked about the possible stop at La Cienega, and I know I've read that Metro is looking at a bus line that would be a high-speed line, or fast line, whatever, down La Cienega. But I was also asking, how do people get up to the Sunset Strip? I mean, there are thousands of employees that work up there, and as well as thousands of visitors. I think it might be a good idea to figure out a way to get people up to the Sunset Strip. I was thinking maybe you don't have to have a separate stop, but if you could basically connect, put a station up at, not a station, but an entrance to the subway up at the Sunset Strip, and then put an escalator down, and then like a people mover or one of those moving walkways like they have at airports. That might be an option. Anyways, I'm taking a lot of time here. Thank you so much for this. I'm looking forward to it, and I hopefully it can be started in time for the 2028 Olympics. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Aaron Steinchester, Steve Lance, and Dylan Guerra. Aaron, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks for having this meeting and taking my comment. I just wanted to echo some of the other commenters about the branch lines. I think it acknowledges that this is part of a regional and already existing bus network that we're looking to improve. It seems like the hybrid option is an attempt to sort of reconcile two competing huge needs that we have in the network, which is a quick north-south spine, and to serve Santa Monica, which is already a super busy bus line. I used to take it every day through West Hollywood. It was getting super busy. So and West Hollywood should have its own, it's a destination. It's an important part of our region. So it should be covered by good transit in its own right and be considered. And we should also be, but really, I think the thing that I feel like the hybrid option misses is that this is part of an already existing bus network that we're trying to improve. And yeah, so I really would love to see Metro study the branch options and see how that pans out. I also would like to then put in a +1 for the Hollywood Bowl station. I think that'd be really great. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Dylan Guerra, Stephen Rousey, and Leslie Carlis. Dylan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
I work in LA, and I'll be moving in October. I just wanted to echo my support for the previous speakers who voiced support for the spur option. One for Brea, and then one to connect to West Hollywood from Hollywood and Highland to link up with the D line, Wilshire and La Cienega. If not that, then I think probably the best option would just be the La Brea line, and do a heavy rail spur through West Hollywood to connect to Hollywood and Highland. Just to at least have Metro study that, I think would be critical. Would echo that we need to speed this up as well. This is probably the most critically important Metro project in the pipeline, in my opinion. I would also like to echo support for the Hollywood Bowl stop. You know, that seems to be like overlooked part of this project, but I think it would be very critical and would get a lot of cars off the road and help with that, you know, infamously bad traffic. And lastly, just wanted to say I really support Metro staff and appreciate all you guys do. I know your jobs are not easy dealing with all these comments and all these people, but you folks are changing the city for the better. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next two speakers will be Stephen Rousey and Leslie Carlis. Stephen, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for having me speak. I just wanted to voice my support for the West Hollywood hybrid version of the line. And also support of the, you know, as much undergrounding along San Vicente as possible. There's a lot of sort of cross traffic on small streets that prevent, yeah, even more traffic on the larger ones. That's really important. And that neighborhood, while I don't live in it, I know it doesn't have much parks, and sort of removing a park is never a good thing for a neighborhood. Also, love the idea of going up to the Hollywood Bowl. And, you know, alleviating that traffic sounds like a wonderful plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Leslie Carlis. Leslie, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Leslie Carlis, the president of the West Hollywood West Residents Association. Metro's Advanced Alternatives Analysis Study Final Screening Report Executive Summary, dated August 2020, indicates the hybrid line runs at grade or aerial on San Vicente between Beverly and Santa Monica Boulevard. We've also been told the line would be underground. We'd like clarification as we have concerns that an at-grade or aerial route between Beverly and Santa Monica would cut an established neighborhood in half and would be mere feet from residential front doors on San Vicente. We're also concerned about the impact at-grade or aerial configuration would have on noise, air quality, and the quality of life in our neighborhood. West Hollywood also incorporates San Vicente between Melrose and Santa Monica Boulevard in its Pride and Halloween celebrations, which will take place at the park on San Vicente. If it's going to be an above ground configuration, whether it's at grade or aerial, it makes more sense to have it on La Cienega, as it would also serve Cedars-Sinai and the Beverly Center. And would be a short walk from the station at La Cienega and Beverly, or third to the PDC, which has basically been sitting empty for years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Andrew Herman. Andrew, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you very much for this Zoom meeting and the presentation. I'm a generally very big proponent of Metro, and I feel like the these large projects for all the subway that's being built, they're big, but they're definitely going to be worth it in the long term. I'm a resident and a property owner in the section that is sort of partway between the currently in construction Wilshire and La Brea stop, and also kind of equidistant from that to where it is essentially San Vicente Boulevard, the lower section of San Vicente Boulevard. And although I'm not right on San Vicente, I do believe that having that line at grade would be a big mistake long term for the essentially the same reasons that previous people have mentioned. I believe that creating creating that line below grade in that section of San Vicente will be very, very vital to the neighborhood. Other than that, looking at this presentation, I think that the general consensus is that Metro is trying to kind of serve two masters as they're kind of debating the different line possibilities. And I generally think that having multiple lines or spurs or a loop or something that will serve multiple areas of the city will be best, even if that is potentially a longer project and obviously much more expensive. But considering what is at stake within the area, right in the immediate area of the city right here, and also the greater areas that Metro serve, I think a combination of both, either the La Brea and the hybrid line or some sort of spurs or loops would be ideal. And I see my time is running out, so I'll end with saying, there are there's new possibilities for infrastructure funding on a federal level, which seems to be the new climate right now. And I hope Metro is considering that when they consider the costs of these endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was actually our last speaker. Patrick?
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize that Josh Kirpies and Sebastian Lozano with the Sullivan Bloom's office is here. And we're going to keep this open till 1:30. So if there's other callers, other comments, we're going to be here till 1:30. So we'll just hang out till then. But also, if you were able to see in the chat, we posted the story map, which is basically kind of like a recreation of this presentation. The story map, if you go to metro.net/Crenshaw North and go under the meetings tab, you'll see, scroll down, you'll see where there's a story map there where you can kind of follow along.
We actually have speakers. So Steve Lance, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please begin speaking and you will have 2 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. It's a question, actually. You've been showing financial numbers for the costs of each of the routes. Are those numbers assuming that the line will be finished in 2043 or 7 or whenever you're talking about? And if it was completed earlier, would those numbers drop dramatically? That's my question. I'm done.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other callers in the queue, Melanie?
No, there are not. Oh, now we do. There are 2 speakers lined up. James Okazaki. I see the hand just went down. Ann Rubin will be our next speaker. And we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Ann Rubin. I live in Carthay Circle, south of Wilshire. I'm very intrigued by the comments from Mehmet Burker and this idea that WeHo kicks in a chunk of money, but it digs a bigger hole for funds. And I'm mostly concerned about gentrification and zoning. I drove the whole route the other day, and I can see where there's potential for more of these market rate luxury buildings that are part of the density plan, but does nothing to solve our affordable housing crisis. And I think this subway, well, it's not really a subway, I guess it's a light rail underground, will be all about upzoning and luxury housing. And that's how we would fill that funding gap with the EIFD, the taxing zone. And I'd like to know how Metro works with zoning and planning so that we can get transit without gentrification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be James Okazaki. James, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, you know, given that you only have $2.25 billion in Measure M, and you're talking about a much greater double, almost tripling of the cost for the various options, why decide not to include a NEPA study? I presume you're going to have to go after some federal funding. So why not include not just the CEQA, but a NEPA related environmental study to take care of the need for the federal funding in the future at this time, rather than, you know, modifying it later? Why can't you do a NEPA study now? Thanks.
Thank you. And Melanie, are there any other callers in the queue?
Yes, actually, a hand just raised right now. David Fenn, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Fenn. I'm just speaking for myself. Just reacting to some of the comments and seeing in the chat here and from some of the speakers. I'd just like to note that I think the spur option being discussed is completely unrealistic, thinking about regional politics, and Measure M is scheduled out into the 2060s and 2070s. There's a number of other parts of the region that look at projects in other, in various parts as competition with their own. So the suggestion that you could just add in another line and that would solve this problem just doesn't feel realistic in the world that we live in. The hybrid is really our best chance to get something done before 2047 with acceleration and local funds, and building a big coalition that can get this done. I'd also like to point out that West Hollywood isn't the only potential source of funds outside of Metro. There's state funding, there's federal funding, there's the potential for LA and the county to participate in an enhanced infrastructure financing district. Something like that could also include funding for affordable housing. It could include, it could become a boundary that could serve as a mechanism for anti-displacement measures. It could really solve a lot of the problems that are being discussed here. And finally, the discussion about ridership estimates being similar between the three alternatives really speaks more to the limitations of Metro's modeling than what we might expect in reality between the three lines. We know that Metro's modeling is heavy on peak hour, long distance commute trips, essentially convincing people who drive long distance to convert to transit. And that's something that we've seen challenged with things like the Expo line, where you have additional midday tourism, weekend and off-peak trips, something that Metro's Next Gen study is really trying to capture with the bus system. That's also something we could see on the rail system, and I would hope that Metro will refine their modeling to take that into account given the destinations in this area. Thanks so much. Bye.
Melanie, any callers in the queue?
There are currently no callers in the queue.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like our numbers have dropped off a little bit. Maybe there's still someone who might join later during their lunch hour to provide a comment. So we'll stay here till 1:30.
I actually see a couple hands just went up right now. So our next three speakers will be Zenon Crow, Thomas Dorsey, and Brandon Kaplan. Zenon, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Hi, sorry, I feel like I've been here forever now. We've just been talking in the chat. It's been great. I just dropped a question in the chat to you, Patrick. I was wondering if you're allowed to respond to the public comment, because like there've been a few questions raised, but I understand like if you're not. So I just wanted to get some clarification if there's any way we could actually reach out to you by email or something like that, so we could hear Metro's official, or not Metro's official, but at least your input on some of the things we're saying.
Yeah, sure. Just email Crenshaw north at metro.net. And but for this forum, we're just listening really. So, but if if getting information, anything else we can provide assistance with, please email Crenshaw north at metro.net.
Thank you very much. Our next two speakers will be Thomas Dorsey and Brandon Kaplan. Thomas, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
I apologize for arriving a little late to this forum, but my question is, to what extent is Metro weighting the risk of more difficult alignment options, meaning the alignment options that would curve and go over towards La Cienega or to San Vicente up to Santa Monica Boulevard? Clearly, there were, or at least from a non-geotechnical engineering perspective, the Fairfax and the La Brea options would seem to be more certain, easier to execute, and therefore less subject to higher costs. So I'd like to see some representation addressing that. That's all.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Brandon Kaplan. Brandon, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello again. I just wanted to elaborate further on a construction, my construction comment, because I'm thinking ahead to just even the Hollywood and Highland station, and that being heavy rail transit, i.e. subway, and we have a light rail option coming in. I'm very, very curious about the construction aspect, and how these things will be placed, where they will be placed, how that adds to the cost, because we're in very thorny territory here, as even the comments have illuminated. But this is a difficult, and to quote Metro from last year, a physically fully built out environment. The station placement and how that will work, because when you talk about the Grove, for example, where is that going to go? And I mean, I can think of places, obviously, but sadly I'm not an engineer. So I just want to elaborate on that further. I'm just very curious to see how this project will be executed in construction, because it is, we have such a built out environment. And I applaud you, because this is a massive undertaking. And yeah, just very curious to see about it. And thank you so much for letting me speak again. And I look forward to hearing more soon.
Thank you very much. And that was our last speaker in the queue.
Okay.
Yeah, hand just went up.
Okay. We'll definitely stay on for people who have not commented before, and like I said, we'll stay here till 1:30.
Thank you. So Marie-Louise Morgan, we will now prompt you to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I feel strongly that major transit lines should run along commercial corridors, not cut through residential areas. And as somebody has already pointed out, the uh, the leg going through San Vicente is the only one that is not on a commercial corridor. So I'm pleading for you to please take that off the table. Remember that rail lines and highways have cut through many communities and have created the inequities that we live with today, many of them. Additionally, destroying San Vicente with an at grade line would destroy the very little green space that we have in this park staved area. And it would bring an end to not just the green space, but to the trees that are there. And we need, obviously, those trees are essential if we are going to have any chance of surviving climate change. Clearly then, to me, the extension should run along La Brea Avenue rather than through San Vicente, rather than along San Vicente. Thank you very much. And I appreciate these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Michael Diaz. Michael, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Barring the Crenshaw LAX line being as phase one, will the northern extension be split up into 2 phases? And also, I know the green line is going to link, the green or C line is going to link up towards the K line in the future. Will that have any effects of running from Norwalk all the way towards Hollywood and eventually towards Hollywood Bowl? That's it.
Thank you, Michael. Melanie, any new folks ready to comment? In the queue?
No new hands as of right now. No new hands.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Oh, I see a hand just went up. Oh, okay. It went back down. I see a hand just went up. Zenon Crow, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
I'm back. I can't seem, I was actually going to submit a lot of the comments that I was making in the chat in an email to the email you guys provided, but I can't seem to actually copy paste any of the things in the chat. So I was wondering if the chat will be submitted as part of the public comment. Because I guess it still technically counts as the giving, input in a public forum. I just was curious if it would be counted in public comment or not.
Your next speaker will be Connie McCurdy. Connie, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm opposed to the Transit Authority putting the subway down San Vicente Boulevard. I live not too far from that in walking distance. And like the previous caller said, that it would take away the green spaces that we have along that avenue. And also, those homes that are in Wilshire Vista West are part of they are on the National Register of Historic Places. So it will certainly not be a welcome site for the rail to be on top of the ground going through San Vicente. So I would want you to rethink putting it on San Vicente completely, and maybe do one of the more busier streets like Pico or Wilshire Boulevard that have businesses on it, and not go through the residential community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCurdy. Melanie, any other folks in the queue?
That was our last speaker in the queue, Patrick.
Okay, so what we'll do is we will, like I said, we'll stay here till 1:30, and we will, for new people who have not had a chance to comment or who just arrived, they will be given the opportunity to speak. We are just going to keep it to new people who will comment. So.
The next speaker will be Bill Lamb. Bill, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Well, I guess this is my first time here. I just want to comment. Well, I'm like tending to lean on supporting the San Vicente option going through West Hollywood. But one of my question is, if one of the alternatives uh, have been chosen, will there be like any impact on the bus routes serving in that area where the Crenshaw line is gonna happen between Crenshaw and the Hollywood? So that's my question. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we still have about just under 20 minutes left. So if there's other new callers, not repeat callers or attendees who'd like to comment, maybe you have well, leave us do the comment before we shut down at 1:30. Please do so. Looks like there's just a little over 10 minutes left. So any new callers, attendees, participants would like to comment or question, please do so. Otherwise, we'll shut down at 1:30. Well, there's just a little over 5 minutes left, so we'll be here till 1:30. Any new commenters, please raise your hand. Well, we're down our last minute, so just wanted to thank all those who were able to comment and participate today. Also wanted to recognize Mayor Horvath of West Hollywood, Assemblyman Bloom, and the staff that attended, Jay Greenstein with Councilman Kretz's office, any other offices that were able to attend that maybe weren't able to catch you and recognize you for your attendance, but thank you for coming. Please be sure to email us at Crenshaw North at metro.net. Also visit the website, metro.net/Crenshaw North. There's a lot of information there for the meetings, as well as a story map and other documents from past studies and past meetings and maps and everything you might need there. So if you want to call us, the hotline number is there as well. And but we do thank you for coming out and providing your input and feedback on this project. And again, the scoping period for this project, for the study, will end on May 28th. Started April 15th and it will end Friday, May 28th, 2021. Thank you. Close it out, Melanie.